What is up, gang? Today we are going to be teaching you guys everything that you need to know about the Deathbringer Frost DK in Season 3. Now we're going to cover everything from talents, stats, gear, consumables and enchants, most importantly the rotation, and also your defensives and utility, and then also any macros that I use. So let's get straight into it. So, kicking off things with the talent tree then. So, we're going to be playing Deathbringer. Now, there is argument that Rider of the Apocalypse is slightly better than Deathbringer, but that's more in a coordinated group setting. I think Deathbringer is a lot better for your pugging environments because you have that 45-second like burst window. You're always able to do damage and you're not reliant on like these big coordinated pulls. So, this guide is going to be for Deathbringer. I might make one for Rider. Leave a comment down below if you want to see that. Okay, so I've moved myself down here just so you guys can see. Now, this is the talent tree that you're mainly going to be playing when you're playing Deathbringer Frost DK. There is actually not too many like talents that you can swap about. For the most part, it is pretty locked in. But let's cover some of those talents that you may be able to swap out if you do want to. So on the class side of the talent tree then, I'm locked into Wraithwalk. Now, because we're playing Deathbringer, we don't have the horse in combat that the Rider of the Apocalypse gets to use and abuse. So we are quite lacking on mobility. As we all know, this has been a problem for DKs forever until Rider became a thing. So I would probably always opt for Wraithwalk over Grip of the Dead. But if you do want that extra slow from Grip of the Dead, then you can swap out Wraithwalk for that. Now, over on the left side here, I am taking Osmosis. Now, this is going to increase my healing received by 15% whenever I have anti-magic shell active. So that's a super nice defensive buff. You can actually swap this out for Insidious Chill, which is going to help out your tanks because it's going to make the mobs auto-attack less, basically. So that's going to help free up some damage for your tanks. But what you could also do is you could sacrifice 6% extra armor from Runic Protection and bang that into Osmosis and then play these two talents on the left. Generally, what I kind of tend to do though is I will play like this or even Insidious Chill and Runic Protection instead. So that is kind of the build that I would rock for the class side of the talent tree. Down the middle in Deathbringer, there is nothing that we're going to be changing here. All of these choice nodes are completely locked in. You don't want to change any of these. This is what you're going to be rocking with. So we've got our Reaper's Mark, which is going to deal some big upfront damage and apply a Reaper's Mark that we then build up to 55 stacks, and upon reaching 55 stacks is going to explode for massive single target and also AOE damage. It's then with the Exterminate talent down the bottom here going to make our next two Obliterates or Frost Scythes cost one less rune and also summon two scythes that the first scythe is going to strike your main target for some big priority damage, and the second scythe within that same global from the one press of the Frost Scythe or Obliterate is going to cleave for some extra AoE damage. Looks sick. This is why we all want to play Deathbringer, right? With the Reaper's Mark, you don't really have to worry too much about actually achieving maximum stacks. It's going to happen very passively as long as you're pressing your buttons. Whenever you deal Shadow Frost damage, that's going to apply 2 stacks of Reaper's Mark. And if that crits, it's then going to apply 4 stacks of Reaper's Mark. These Reaper's Marks explode super quickly, so you don't have to think too much. It's kind of just set and forget, and it's going to explode as long as you're executing your damage rotation, which we'll get onto in a bit. And so that is pretty much everything notable covered for the Deathbringer hero talent tree. So let's move over to the Frost DK side of things, the Frost specific talents. And there's one major change that you can make with this talent tree, and it is that you can swap out Frigid Executioner here for Frost Reaper. Now, it seems like in the higher keys, a lot more DKs are playing Frost Reaper because this is going to increase your boss damage or your prio damage if you are pressing Obliterate, because it's going to deal 10% increased damage. But this talent here doesn't really do anything for us on AoE. It's going to cause our Frost Strike to cleave onto another target. But instead, if you want to continue buffing up your AoE, I would just leave the point in Frigid Executioner here. This is going to cause our Runic Empowerment to have a 25% chance to grant us 1 additional rune. So that's going to play into AoE and also single target as well, but you definitely do get more of a single target benefit from Frost Reaper. So apart from those 2 talents that we can swap around, then let's cover some of the more notable talents for the Frost DK that super impact the way that you play this spec. This spec kind of revolves all around this talent right here, which is Killing Machine. Your auto attack critical strikes and also other abilities, which we'll get onto later, make your next Obliterate deal frost damage and critically strike, or it makes your Frost Scythe critically strike for 3 times the normal damage. So every time, for the most part, that you're pressing Obliterate or Frost Scythe, you want to be consuming a Killing Machine proc. This Killing Machine proc is also going to fire a Glacial Advance through your target at 60% effectiveness, which is just some nice extra AoE damage. It's also going to give you a 20% chance to grant yourself a rune from consuming the Killing Machine proc. Consuming Killing Machine is then going to grant you 1% critical strike chance for 10 seconds, stacking up to 5 times with Bone Grinder. And then once you've consumed 5 Killing Machines, it is then going to increase the damage of all of your frost damage by 20% for 10 seconds. So as you can see, everything is tying around this Killing Machine proc that is such a core part of our rotation. Then to additionally proc Killing Machine, during your Pillar of Frost windows, which you're going to get every 45 seconds, your Frost Strike, Glacial Advance, and Howling Blast are always going to grant you a charge or a proc of Killing Machine, and also have a 20% chance to generate you a rune. And additionally, your Empowered Rune weapon is going to make your next Obliterate or Frost Scythe cost no runes. Then to generate ourselves even more Killing Machine procs, we have Might of the Frozen Waste here, which is a passive when using a two-hander. For the most part, you're going to be wanting to use a two-hander as a Frost DK in Season 3. But this makes it so that your auto attack critical strikes will also always grant you Killing Machine procs. Now, with all of this Killing Machine goodness that we're getting and being able to stack up our Killing Machine 2 times, we then have Killing Streak, which causes our Obliterate and Frost Scythe to consume all of our Killing Machine stacks. So this talent allows us to consume our maximum of 2 stacks of Killing Machine with 1 button press of Obliterate or Frost Scythe. And this is going to deal 25% increased critical strike damage and also grant us a 2% stacking haste buff for 8 seconds. We'll be able to generate even more Killing Machines whenever we use our Empowered Rune weapon, which has been completely reworked coming into this patch. I wouldn't even consider this ability a cooldown anymore, but this is going to deal some negligible Shadow Frost damage. That's not the reason that we're going to be using this ability, but it's going to grant us 40 runic power and also grant us a Killing Machine, really smoothing out our rotation. This has a maximum of 2 charges, and you want to use these very liberally because another notable talent pickup is Frostbound Will. Whenever we consume our Rhyme procs, which we're getting very frequently as well, that's going to reduce the cooldown of our Empowered Rune weapon by 6 seconds. So Empowered Rune weapon is constantly coming off of cooldown throughout your rotation. It's already a 30-second cooldown as it is. So you just want to be cycling through these as much as you can because you're going to be cycling through so many Rhyme procs. And then the final Killing Machine interaction that I want to talk about is Breath of Sindragosa has now been reworked so that consuming Killing Machine or the Rhyme procs is going to increase the duration of our Breath of Sindragosa by 0.8 seconds instead of the previous iteration of this where it used to consume our runic power. This is a huge quality of life change and it makes it play so much smoother. The amount of Rhyme procs and more importantly the amount of Killing Machine procs that we're consuming just means that we can extend our breath so much easier and it just plays so much more fluidly. This is also going to grant you a charge of Empowered Rune weapon at the start of it to make sure that you have already used a charge of your Empowered Rune weapon before you get into it as to not waste a charge. So that is all of the talents covered for the Deathbringer Frost DK then. Like I said, there's not too much you can change here. For the most part, this is going to be the build that you're locking in. It gives you a really nice 45-second burst damage profile with Pillar of Frost, and then an even bigger burst damage profile with a 1.5 minute cooldown on Breath of Sindragosa. So basically, you just use a Pillar of Frost in between your Breath of Sindragosa windows, and you have that 45-second burst and then 1.5 minute burst here. Now, generally, for the Frost DK, you want to get as much crit and mastery as you can on your gear. Now, strength is a very, very strong stat for the Frost DK, so it's likely that the eye level gains is going to mean that you're just going to equip your highest item level piece, but I would, unfortunately, the boring answer is to recommend you guys to sim yourself with that. But following that, mastery is going to be your most important stat, and stack as much of this as possible. This is just going to flat buff your Frost abilities damage. And then following that, we're going to go with our critical strike secondary stat. This is going to synergize well with many, many talents that we have on the Frost Death Knight and just make you deal even more damage and smooth out your rotation even more. After this, we'll then pour into a bit of haste, and finally, versatility is our least favored secondary stat. Now, while we're talking about stats, with the Reshi Wrapped, you want to socket that with an energizing fiber gem because that's going to grant you extra mastery, and mastery is our most important secondary stat. Let's move over to your enchants then. So for your cloak, you're going to want to go with the Chant of Burrowing Rapidity. On your chest, you'll go with the Crystalline Radiance for some extra main stat. Bracers, you'll go with a chant of Armored Speed. On your legs, you'll go with some more main stat with the Stormbound Armor Kit. On your boots, you'll go with Scout's March. And then finally, on your rings, you'll go with Radiant Mastery. On your weapon, as I've already mentioned, you'll want to be running with a two-handed weapon for the Frost DK, so you're going to enchant this or rune forge this with a rune of the Fallen Crusader. Let's cover your consumables then. So you're always going to want to run with the Flask of Alchemical Chaos as your flask. For your DPS potion, you'll go with the Tempered Potion, and for your healing potion, you'll go with the Invigorating Healing Potion. Your weapon consumable, you'll want to use the Algari Mana Oil, and if you can afford it, you'll go with the Crystallized Augment rune for your rune. Your food will be Beladar's Bounty to get some extra mastery. You'll want to make sure that you're gemming with at least one culminating Blasphemite to get that extra crit effect, and then you'll want one of each gem type to max out that crit effect, and then you'll fill the rest of your gems with the Masterful Ruby. So let's move on to crafting then. So early in the season, it's likely that the Charge Claymore is going to be your best craft with the Ascension Embellishment, and even going into the end season with your Bisque gear, this combo is still going to keep up. But regardless, as long as you don't get lucky in your vault and get a myth track weapon early in the season with good stats, then this is likely going to be your best craft. However, later in the season, or if you do loot a myth track weapon early, then your best embellishments are going to be the Dawn Thread lining. So you'll want to craft 2 off pieces of gear, likely a belt and a bracer, and whack a Dawn Thread lining embellishment on that for the extra crit. Let's touch on trinkets then. So you're ideally going to want to run with 1 on use and then 1 passive trinket. For your passive trinkets, the Astral Antenna is going to be your best, but the Improvised Seaphorian Pacemaker is a very nice alternative from Mythic Plus. And then for your on-use trinkets, the Araz Ritual Forge, I believe, is your best on-use trinket. However, the Cursed Stone Idol from Mythic Plus, Halls of Atonement, is going to be a very, very strong alternative as well. And if you can't get your hands on those 2 as your on-use, then the Unyielding Nether Prism is also a very good shout. Now, while we're talking about gear, I do just quickly want to touch on the Delve Belt. So you're going to be rocking with this belt with the Electric Current enchant for the extra mastery on it. And then you're going to replace this belt whenever you get a nicely statted 710 item level belt or a 703 crafted belt with the embellishment that is Dawn Thread lining. So that is everything covered in terms of talents, gear, and consumables. Let's move on to what you guys are all here for, which is the rotation. Now, first off, I just want to start off by giving you guys some general tips. Then we're going to move on to some advanced tips, and then we'll cover the actual rotation, okay? So my first general tip would be for you guys to macro your Pillar of Frost and your Reaper's Mark together. Pillar of Frost is not on the global cooldown, so it means that you can send both of these abilities with 1 button press. Make sure that you have Pillar of Frost cast first in the sequence. I'll leave this macro in a paste bin in the description alongside all my other macros that we'll cover later. But this Pillar of Frost is going to buff up your Reaper's Mark, so make sure that the Reaper's Mark is always cast after the Pillar of Frost, right? You're always going to want to send these cooldowns together. So I'm not a person that I never want to macro abilities together. I'd rather press them separately, but you literally lose nothing by macroing these abilities together, so do not worry. A quick next general tip is always use a 2-handed weapon when you're playing Frost. It is going to slightly beat out a dual wield build, so just make sure you're rocking or trying to get your hands on a 2-handed weapon. And then some general tips for how the spec actually plays. So killing machines are going to be your main damage source when it comes to the Frost DK. If you're pressing a rune spender without a killing machine, it's going to feel like it tickles. Killing machine is what your whole spec revolves around, okay? So make sure that you're trying to buff up as many rune spenders as you can with your killing machine procs. This is going to cause your Obliterate to deal frost damage instead and always critically strike. And then it's going to make your Frost Scythe deal 3 times the normal critical strike damage. So that is huge, huge damage. It's also, with the Murderous Efficiency talent, going to give you a 20% chance to grant you an extra rune, so that's going to smooth out your rune economy. And then with Enduring Strength, it's also going to extend the strength buff that you get after your Pillar of Frost window, because you're going to be getting so much more critical strikes, because Killing Machine is always going to guarantee a critical strike with your Obliterate and Frost Scythe. So this whole spec just centers around Killing Machine, okay? Now, to get the most efficient rotation out of this and to make sure you're maximizing the amount of Killing Machine procs that you're consuming, what you want to do is you want to try and balance, or I guess weave, the spending of runes and runic power. Your runes are going to generate you runic power, so then you can use that runic power, and the runic power then has a chance to generate runes through the runic empowerment passive that you have here. Each runic power you spend has a 1.8% chance to instantly grant you a rune. And then with the Talent Frigid Executioner, that has a 25% chance to refund an additional 1 rune. If you're just spending runes, then you're going to overcap on your runic power, which is then going to leave you dry of runes, but also it means that you're going to be missing out on opportunities to generate more runes and therefore spend more killing machine procs, which we know is what centers around the whole spec centers around. So it's just kind of this balancing act between spending killing machine procs and consuming runes, and then also consuming your runic power because they both like have a positive feedback loop into each other, right? Now, another general tip I would give you guys is to use Empowered Rune Weapon very, very liberally. Now, you can even just macro this into a core damaging rotation ability, and you'll only lose like around 1.5% DPS. Wouldn't recommend that. We want to be playing our spec optimally, right? But you get Empowered Rune Weapon back so frequently. It's a 30-second cooldown as it is anyway with 2 charges. Your Breath of Sindragosa is also going to grant you a charge of this, but most notably, whenever you consume a Rhyme proc, it's going to reduce the cooldown of your Empowered Rune Weapon by 6 seconds, and we are always getting these. Now, you want to ideally use your Empowered Rune Weapon when you're starved of runic power, or if you need to generate a Killing Machine proc, because like we've said, we'd never want to use Obliterate or Frost Scythe without a Killing Machine proc. So that's the 2 times that you ideally use it. But the most important thing is to just never overcap on Empowered Rune Weapon, okay? And then my final general tip is when to use Obliterate and Frost Scythe, and then also when to use Frost Strike and Glacial Advance. So during your Pillar of Frost window, you can actually start to Frost Scythe when you're at 2 targets. However, I would probably still recommend that in any 2 target situation, you'd probably choose to Obliterate your priority target instead. There's likely going to be a scarier mob or a mob that has more HP, and to be most efficient, you're probably just going to want to Obliterate in a 2 target scenario, and regardless anyway, you're always going to want to Obliterate on 2 targets outside of your Pillar of Frost window. So generally what I'd recommend is Obliterate on up to 2 targets, Frost Scythe on 3 or more targets, and then with your runic power spenders, you'll Glacial Advance whenever there's 2 or more targets. So you're only Frost Striking when there is 1 target, okay? Let's move on to some more advanced tips for the Frost DK then. So, before your Pillar of Frost window, you want to ensure that you have 3 to 4 runes spare ready to go into that Pillar of Frost window, so you're not starved of runes and then you're not just sat there kind of like twiddling your thumbs during your most impactful damage window, right? You'd also ideally have 1 charge of Empowered Rune Weapon going into your Pillar of Frost window, so you can generate killing machines and also generate that runic power, which is then going to allow you to generate even more killing machines. Basically, Pillar of Frost is the majority of your damage on this spec, and you want to make sure that you can get the most out of these windows. So it is actually very common that before your Pillar of Frost window is coming up, when you've got like 4 or 5 seconds left on the cooldown of Pillar of Frost, it is quite common to just kind of not do anything for those like 4 to 5 seconds to just allow your runes to generate back up. You can still spend some runic power, but I would try and make sure that you're going into your Pillar of Frost windows with around 3 to 4 runes, okay? So then my next tip for the Frost Death Knight, my next advanced tip is for AoE specifically. I mean, it also works on single target as well, but whenever you consume a killing machine proc, it's also going to fire a Glacial Advance through the target. So if I generate myself a killing machine proc here, I don't want to be facing this way when I Frost Scythe, because then my Glacial Advance that is fired passively is only going to hit these 2 targets on the right? So I've got another killing machine proc. This is how I want to position so that my Glacial Advance hits everything and also applies Razor Eyes to everything, right? So bit of a positional requirement that you always need to keep in the back of your mind, but it will become very second nature to you. It's pretty forgiving as well. So just make sure that you're always facing as many targets as you can when you're consuming a killing machine proc. And then the final advanced tip that I'd like to give you guys is during your Pillar of Frost windows specifically, you want to try and consume 5 killing machine stacks as quickly as you can, because with Bone Grinder, that's going to increase your critical strike chance. Then once you consume 5 killing machine stacks, it's then going to grant you 20% increased frost damage for that whole pillar window. And that is just going to be some fatty damage on top of the massive amount of strength gains that you get going into your pillar window. So that is your goal. As soon as you get into your pillar window, you want to try and consume as many killing machine procs as you can to get your bone grinder rolling for big damage. Right, so that is all of the general tips and also the advanced tips covered. So let's move on to the actual rotation then. So we're going to start with single target here. So this is still using the Mythic Plus build that I recommended in this guide. And this is the rotation that you're going to want to be using on your boss fight, okay? So let's crack on with it then. So this is what the opener is going to look like, right? The tank's about to pull the boss, you're approaching the boss. Now there is two ways to open on the boss, depending on if the boss is already pulled, because if you start with an empowered rune weapon, as I have here, now this is ideal, but this is going to pull the boss because it's going to deal some damage, right? So make sure that the tank is pulled because you don't want to pull aggro of the boss before the tank has actually got aggro of the boss. And that's why instead you might open with an obliterate instead, just to make sure that like at that point you're going to be in melee range anyway, so you would have pulled and the tank would be on the boss. But ideally, you open with an empowered rune weapon. Now, this is going to generate you a killing machine proc. So we're then going to obliterate because we also don't want to overcap on our runes, right? We're then going to follow this with all of our cooldowns, including our potions and also any unused trinkets that we might use. So you want to use your pillar here. You want to use your Reaper's Mark, and that's going to be in the same macro, right? And you're also going to use your Breath of Sindragosa. All in this like same global pretty much, as well as any potions and also trinkets. So as you can see, I press all of that here. There we go. Now immediately after this, we're going to follow with an obliterate because our main mission is to consume our killing machine procs. So as you can see, I then obliterate. By the way, down here on the right hand side, this is tracking all of my previous abilities that I've used. So if you're ever like wondering what I'm pressing, just have a look down here. And then straight out of this, we're going to use our empowered rune weapon, and that's going to generate us a second charge of killing machine as well. And then we're going to obliterate straight out of that as well. And that's going to consume both of our killing machine procs with our killing streak talent. And as you can see, we're already at 4 stacks of killing streak. So we're getting some nice extra haste rocking and rolling, right? So that is our very basic opener covered, right? So remember that Breath of Sindragosa is going to grant us a charge of our empowered rune weapon. So that is why it is our main mission or main aim to finish our opener with an empowered rune weapon, because moving on to our priority system that we will follow after our opener, our top priority is to never overcap on empowered rune weapon, right? I don't know why I can't speak. So we're now going to follow this with an obliterate. And now I'm going to follow, as you can see, I'm almost overcapping on runic power. So on single target, I'm then going to frost strike. That's going to generate us a killing machine proc because of our obliteration talent. And we also got lucky and got a rhyme proc here. So now I have a decision to make. I can either consume my killing machine proc, which I think I'm going to do here, or I can rhyme and get a second proc of my killing machine and then consume 2 killing machines with my next obliterate. However, remember that our auto attack critical strikes are also going to generate us a killing machine proc passively, to try not to munch those procs. So here, I'm probably going to obliterate, as you can see. Then after that, I use my rhyme proc. Then I'm going to obliterate again because I've got 2 charges of killing machine. If you can see this graphic here, I know the quality is a bit scuffed right now. If I have one of these graphics, then that means I've got 1 killing machine stack. If I've got 2 on like 1 on either side, then I've got 2. So now we're going to obliterate again. Then we're going to follow that with a frost strike because we're almost overcapping on runic power. Then we've got 2 charges of killing machine again. So we're going to obliterate. Then we're going to empowered rune weapon and obliterate again here. We've slightly overcapped on our runic power, so we want to make sure that we're frost striking ASAP. That's going to generate us 2 stacks of killing machine because I would have got an auto attack crit here as well. So our main mission or main aim is to consume those 2 killing machine procs because we never ever want to waste a killing machine stack, right? So our highest priority in our system is to never overcap on empowered rune weapon. And then we want to use like our main cooldowns, which is Pillar of Frost and also Reaper's Mark. And then our next highest priority is to consume 2 stacks of killing machine with our obliterate because we never ever want to munch a killing machine proc. Okay? So then following this, I'm going to make sure that I don't overcap on my runic power with that Frost Strike that I just sent. Now I've got 1 Rime proc and 2 Killing Machine stacks, okay? Sorry about the quality, but that means that my highest priority here is to use my Obliterate to make sure that I'm consuming these Killing Machine stacks so that I don't overcap and munch a Killing Machine stack, right? So Obliterate into a Rime. Now we're outside of our pillar window, so our Frost Strike and also our Rime procs are no longer guaranteeing us a Killing Machine proc, right? So outside of pillar, this is where our empowered rune weapon becomes much more of a buffer to try and make sure that we can buff up as many obliterators as we can with a Killing Machine stack, right? So we're going to Frost Strike here. We got lucky and got a Killing Machine stack, so we're going to Obliterate. Then we're going to Frost Strike again. We got a Rime proc, so we're going to send that. We're kind of just like fishing here to get lucky and get a Killing Machine stack, like from our auto attack crits. We didn't get one, so then we're going to Empowered Rune Weapon to make sure that we can. We also got a auto attack crit here, it looks like, but we've Empowered Rune Weapon there to make sure that we're going to Obliterate with a Killing Machine stack, because otherwise it's going to hit like a wet noodle. So we press our Obliterate. Now we're overcapping on runic power, so I'm going to Frost Strike into. Oh, and then I got an auto attack crit. So now I've got 2 stacks of Killing Machine and 1 stack of Rime outside of my pillar. My main priority is still to just consume my Killing Machine stacks if I'm at 2. Think of it as you want to try and just send these Killing Machine stacks as fast as you can, like even on mainly on 1 stack, but the 2 stacks of Killing Machine is kind of a buffer to give you that sort of like grace period for if you get lucky and get an auto attack crit, then it doesn't feel so bad because you're not munching that extra Killing Machine stack, because it then stacks up to 2 times. But as soon as you get 2 stacks of Killing Machine, it is then your highest priority to send that Obliterate to consume them, right? So then we've consumed the Killing Machine stack. Then we're going to use our Rime proc. Then we're going to use our Obliterate here after our Frost Strike because we've got 2 stacks of Killing Machine. Oh, I should have. This is on the PTR, so I think the latency was a little bit high, so it's kind of hard to judge that. But I should have sent my Obliterate first there because I had 2 stacks of Killing Machine. Then I can send the Rime after. There is periods and there is times where this spec you have to react very, very quickly, and it is hard to play this spec perfectly because of these auto attacks, just like randomly generating you a stack of Killing Machines. Sometimes you might munch that. You can get a weak aura that tracks your weapon swing timer. I ain't into all that, so I'm just going to leave it and try and play my best without that. I don't want to be having to. I'm not playing classic, right? I ain't trying to track my weapon swing timer. So we've Obliterated there. Then we're going to Frost Strike because we're closing in on overcapping on our runic power. Probably could have pressed an Empowered Rune Weapon there to buff up that Obliterate that I just used. Then we're going to Rime first into Obliterate. We're kind of going to pool a little bit here because we're coming up to our Pillar of Frost window. So we don't want to go into our Pillar of Frost with less than 3 or 4 runes, right? So as you can see, I just kind of like sit AFK here, and that is unfortunately what you should be doing to make sure that I'm going into my Pillar of Frost window right now, which I also want to send as fast as I can, because if I delay this Pillar of Frost and this Reaper's Mark, then I'm also going to have to delay my Breath of Sindragosa when that comes back up, because this is a minute and a half, this is 45 seconds, so you have to try and send this, sometimes even if the pack's about to die, to make sure that you can send your breath on cooldown with your Pillar of Frost and Reaper's Mark again when your breath comes back up, right? So I'm gearing up here to go back into my pillar window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Pillar and Reaper's Mark. That's going to generate me a Killing Machine stack because of my Reaper's Mark. That's always going to guarantee that, right? So then I'm going to follow this with an Empowered Rune Weapon just to get that like on cooldown, because I'm about to get probably a load of Rime procs, and also buff up that Obliterate to consume 2 Killing Machine stacks to also get my Bone Grinder buff, which you can see here. So I'm getting 20% extra frost damage for this pillar window. So then after this, we're going to Frost Strike into an Obliterate because 2 stacks of Killing Machine. Frost Strike again. Here I can Rime to get my 2nd stack of Killing Machine, and then I'm going to Obliterate. Then I'm going to Frost Strike again, Obliterate here. Then I'm going to Rime into Obliterate again, into a Frost Strike. My auto attack also crit there, so I'm going to Obliterate into a Rime, into an Empowered Rune Weapon here. to finish out my Pillar of Frost window with a double stacked killing machine consumption with my Obliterate, right? And we get a big crit there for 2.5 mil. So that is the single target opener and also the single target priority system and like how you kind of play your rotation after the opener, right? So let's cover the AOE rotation. Now, not much really changes for the AOE rotation. A lot of the priority system and a lot of the opener is still the same, but as long as there's more than 3 targets, you're going to be Frost Scything instead of your Obliterate, and as long as there's more than 2 targets, you're going to be Glacial Advancing instead of Frost Striking, okay? So pretty much the same opener here. So we're going to ideally start with an Empowered Rune Weapon into a Frost Scythe, but you might want to start with a Frost Scythe if the tank hasn't pulled yet, because that Empowered Rune Weapon will pull for you because it does do damage, and then you might pull Rip Aggro and die. But ideally what we would do is you would start with an Empowered Rune Weapon to generate you a Killing Machine stack that you're then going to consume with your Frost Scythe, and again, exactly the same as the single target opener now. So now you're going to use all of your cooldowns. So we're going to use Pillar of Frost, Reaper's Mark, and also our Breath of Sindragosa, all in the same sort of global, as well as any potions and also unused trinkets that we might have. If you've got the Cursed Stone Idol, send that just before, because obviously there's a little cast time for it. Then immediately outside of all of these cooldowns, the Breath of Sindragosa is going to grant us a charge of Empowered Rune Weapon. So we're going to want to immediately follow this with an Empowered Rune Weapon into a Frost Scythe to consume 2 stacks of our Killing Machine and start also stacking up our Bone Grinder as fast as we can, right? So that is the opener. Again, the exact same pretty much priority list goes for AoE, but it's just Frost Scything and Glacial Advancing instead of Obliterating and Frost Striking. So we sent our Frost Scythe. Now we're going to go into a Howling Blast to consume our Rime. That's also going to reduce the cooldown of our Empowered Rune Weapon. Now we got 2 stacks of Killing Machine. I might have actually munched, I'm not too sure, because of the latency on the PTR where I was doing this, I might have munched a second Killing Machine stack here because I got an auto attack crit. You're not always going to be able to help this. You can get a weapon swing timer if you want to track that, but here we have 2 Killing Machine stacks, so we're going to send our Frost Scythe. That's going to deal 3 times the amount of critical strike damage because it's got Killing Machine on it, and also deal 25% increased critical strike damage on top of that because of our Killing Streak talent, and also increase our haste up here with this 5 stack. So after this, we are then closing in on overcapping Runic Power, and we also have no Killing Machine procs here, so we're going to send a Glacial Advance. That's going to generate us a stack of Killing Machine because of our Obliteration talent. Our Glacial Advance, Frost Strike, and Rime procs are always going to generate us a Killing Machine stack inside our Pillar of Frost window, so you kind of want to alternate between the 2, right? So after that, we're then going to consume our 2 stacks of Killing Machine with our Frost Scythe, straight back into a Glacial Advance to not overcap again. Then we're going to Frost Scythe again because we've got 2 stacks of Killing Machine, probably into a Rime proc, yeah, which we use there, and then straight into another Frost Scythe to consume our Killing Machine stacks. Then I'm going to prevent overcapping on Runic Power by Glacial Advancing into an Empowered Rune Weapon because we were about to overcap on 2 charges of Empowered Rune Weapon. So that's going to get us up to 2 stacks of our Killing Machine. And then we're going to send our Frost Scythe first. Then we're going to Rime. Now we're outside of our pillar. So our Howling Blast, our Frost Strike, and our Glacial Advance are not guaranteed to proc us a Killing Machine proc anymore, okay? So we're going to not overcap on Runic Power by sending our Glacial Advance. Got a Rime proc, so we're going to send that into a Frost Scythe because we've got a Killing Machine stack. It doesn't really matter about consuming 2 stacks of Killing Machine every time with your Frost Scythe. You kind of just want to send your Killing Machine stacks when you can. Don't think too much into it, into like, oh, I don't have 2 stacks of Killing Machine here. So kind of just send them when you can, right? So we're overcapping on Runic Power. We're going to Glacial Advance. Then we're going to Glacial Advance again here. We got a Rime proc, so we're going to send that. Then we get a Killing Machine stack. And I follow that with an Empowered Rune Weapon because we are about to overcap on our Empowered Rune Weapon in about 8 seconds, which would be on our next Rime consumption because that would reduce the cooldown of our Empowered Rune Weapon by 6 seconds, right? So then we're going to Frost Scythe for some big damage, into a Glacial Advance to not overcap on Runic Power. And it's kind of this whole system of balancing, not overcapping on Runic Power, not overcapping on our runes either, and also not overcapping on killing machine stacks and not overcapping on empowered rune weapon charges, right? So then we've got 2 stacks of killing machines, so we're going to Frost Scythe into a Rhyme proc. I probably should have rhymed there, I think, and then gone for the Glacial Advance, because that Glacial Advance might have procced me another Rhyme, which would mean more damage, more priority damage, and also extra cooldown reduction on empowered rune weapon. So that's my bad, but I feel like it's kind of good to like show you guys like where I messed up so that you guys can also learn from my mistakes as well, right? So we're just going to continue here. So we're going to consume our killing machine stacks, then we're not going to overcap on runic power, then we're going to Rhyme into a Frost Scythe. Then I was about to overcap on my empowered rune weapon, so I sent that. I have slightly overcapped on my runic power here, so I probably, before my empowered rune weapon here, what I could have probably done is Glacial Advance, then press my empowered rune weapon, because I still wouldn't have overcapped on my ERW, right? So then we're going to Glacial Advance into Rhyme, and then at this point, we don't really want to spend any runes because we're coming back into our Pillar of Frost window, which we're going to want to send on cooldown to make sure that our next Pillar of Frost after this one lines up with our next breath and we don't have to delay our breath, right? So we want to enter this Pillar of Frost window with at least 3 or 4 runes. So as you can see, this is where we go now. We send again. We're going to go Pillar of Frost, Reaper's Mark, into a Frost Scythe to consume those killing machine stacks, into an empowered rune weapon, straight back into another Frost Scythe to consume 2 killing machine stacks. Then we're going to Rhyme proc first. In AoE, it doesn't matter so much about overcapping on runic power. So we want to send our Rhyme proc first, and then we're going to press our Glacial Advance after. Then that's going to generate us 2 stacks of killing machine, and then we're going to Frost Scythe, right? So that is our highest priority. I don't know what... Oh, I was able to just Frost Scythe back to back then. So I got lucky and was able to consume 2 stacks of killing machine back to back then with 2 different Frost Scythes, right? So then after that, we're going to Rhyme proc. We got 2 stacks of killing machine, so we're going to press our Frost Scythe into a Glacial Advance, and the cycle just continues from here, right? So that is the AoE opener and also the AoE priority. As I already mentioned, the priority system and the opener are very similar for both situations. It's just what runic power and rune spender you're going to use. So that is the rotation covered. Now what I want to do is quickly touch on some of the defensives that the Frost Death Knight has. And by some of the defensives, I mean the whole host of defensives that the Frost DK has. So let me move myself back down here again. So we're just going to go through and talk about each defensive that we have and kind of where we use them, right? So our first one is Anti-Magic Shell. This ability is busted and will prevent so many applications of magic effects being applied to you. So if you know that like a poison's coming in or a magic effect is about to be applied to you, use this and it's probably not going to apply it to you, okay? If something's already applied to you or there's a big just magic damage hit coming in, also use this because it prevents up to 7.3 million damage. It is ridiculous and it's on a 40-second cooldown. Use and abuse this ability because it is busted. Lichborn is also a defensive cooldown when you take the Unholy Endurance talent down here in the class tree. But Lichborn is going to increase your leech by 6% for 12 seconds. It's also going to reduce the damage you take by 15% and also make you immune to Charm Spheres and Sleeves. That's not so relevant. This is more so used as a defensive cooldown. 1.5 minute cooldown as well, so it's not even that long of a cooldown, but just another 15% damage reduction here is huge for the spec. Our biggest defensive is Icebound Fortitude, which is on a 2-minute cooldown, and this is just a flat 30% damage reduction, but also makes you immune to stun effects. So if you do get stunned and you're not expecting to, you can use this to get out the stun, but more importantly, we're going to be using this to survive big hits or big incoming damage, because we're going to take 30% less damage for 8 seconds, right? Another huge and underrated, I feel, defensive for the Death Knight, and this is something that better Death Knights take advantage of, is Death Strike. This isn't just a blood decay ability, right? This is going to heal you for 40% of the damage you took in the last 5 seconds, but it's always going to be a minimum of 11% of your maximum health. This is huge. If you have the runic power to spare and you've just taken a big hit, you're probably low on health and maybe your healer's not able to spot heal you that quickly. Maybe you're playing with a Resto Druid or something. You can Death Strike and you're pretty much going to top yourself. And a lot of the time you're sat on so much runic power that you can press 2 death strikes back to back and just completely take care of your own HP pool. Also, if you've killed a mob recently that yields experience or honor, your next death strike is free and heals for an additional 10%. So even if you've taken no damage, that's a minimum of 20% of your max health in one global that is 35 runic power, okay? And you've always got runic power to spare. Ideally, yes, you would use that for your damage, but you're not going to do any damage if you're dead. So death strike, and do not underestimate how powerful this is as a defensive. And then there are just so many talents in this talent tree for like the class side of the talent tree for the Death Knight. There is just a ridiculous amount. We have anti-magic zone, which is more utility, but we'll cover that now. This is going to place an anti-magic zone on the floor for 8 seconds. It's going to reduce the magic damage taken by your raid or party members by 15%. With this talent down here, the duration's increased and also the cooldown's reduced by 60 seconds. So super nice defensive, but also piece of utility for your group there. You're going to get a lot of extra stamina. So, I mean, I'm 708 and I've got 15 mil health here. You're going to get a lot of extra stamina from Veteran of the Third War talent here. Blood Draw is a super nice passive as well. Whenever you fall below 30% health, which is when it starts to get scary, you then are going to drain some health from nearby enemies and the damage you take is reduced by 10%. And also your death strikes cost is reduced by 10% for 8 seconds. So it's then only going to be 25 runic power, okay? So super nice. But this can only proc every 2 minutes, okay? This is the big stuff right here. Will of the Necropolis. Below 30% health, the damage you take is reduced by 35% flat. So when you're low HP, you are taking so much less damage, it's ridiculous. This is going to help you out so much and save your life so much more than you would expect. This talent is disgusting. It is so broken, but listen, hey, take advantage of it. Ideally, you'd have already death striked at this point to get yourself back up to HP if your healer can't take care of you, but this is just a huge buffer for when you're low health and you don't even have to think about anything like for it, right? And then just the final bit of extra tankiness that you get is the null magic talent down here, which reduces the magic damage you take by 5%, and also the duration of harmful magic effects are reduced by 35%, so that being dots in Mythic Plus, okay? So that's all of your defensives. Anti-magic shell, just use liberally whenever you know that there's magic damage coming in. Death Strike is your savior. Lichborn is kind of like that intermediate cooldown. And then Icebound Fortitude, you want to be more careful when you're using this because it is a 2-minute cooldown. But you just have so many defensives and you are so tanky on this class. So just as long as you're pressing, and even if you're not pressing your defensives, like you're just so passively tanky anyway. So let's move on to the utility for the Frost DK there. So we've already covered Anti-Magic Zone, a 3-minute cooldown that reduces all party members' damage or magic damage taken by 15%. Ideally, you'd be able to call this for when you're placing it down, or you'd have a good idea of where your party is positioned so that you can drop it so that it's a nice place for them to all get into. But this is a really potent cooldown and nice piece of utility for your group. The main utility that the Frost DK is so renowned for, though, is Death Grip. The amount of casters that just stay out of the pack and don't receive any cleave damage and just end up being like full HP after everything else is already dead is a joke. And I feel like this was always such a slept on piece of utility for the DK in general, and it took Frost DK being meta for its damage for them people to realize how disgustingly impactful Death Grip is for your group. Think sharpshooters in Priory, you want to grip them in so that they can get cleaved down because they are some scary mobs, or caster mobs like the web mages and Arakara. Just pull them in. It makes grouping packs up so much easier because then you can AOE crowd control everything around you and also just efficiently cleave everything down, which is going to help out your timer a lot. You can also use this as a single target stop as well. So if all of your party's kicks are on cooldown, you don't have any AOE CC left, you've also got 2 charges of a single target stop where you can grip the mob towards you. It is going to immediately recast that ability probably, but you can do that again, and then hopefully by that time the kicks are back up, right? So speaking of AOE CC, we also have a 1-minute AOE Disorient in Blinding Sleet. So this is a frontal cone, so you want to make sure that you're facing the mobs for this, but this is just going to cause them to get disoriented for 5 seconds, but they're going to be damaged, so that it's going to pretty much immediately break, but it is going to stop or delay any cast going off that maybe can't be kicked. Now, you do also have a mid-range kick in Mind Freeze. I wouldn't normally mention the kicks, but this is a 15-yard range, which is actually pretty notable for a melee spec. You don't actually have to be on top of the mob to kick. So this is super nice to kick those mobs that are like maybe coming in if you don't have your death grip off of cooldown. And then you also have a mid-range single target stun in Asphyxiate, which is going to stun a mob for 5 seconds. This is only a single target stun, but again, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 potentially pieces of utility to stop mobs over and over again, right? And then the final piece of utility is Raise Ally. As a Frost DK or a DK in general, you do have a combat res. So if somebody dies in your party on a boss, for example, or if somebody dies just in a dungeon or in a mob pack, and you want to get them back up because otherwise you might wipe, then just use your Raise Ally because you do boast a combat res. It does cost 30 runic power, so bear that in mind. You are going to have to build up some runic power to use it, and you're going to lose out on some damage, but the amount of damage you gain for raising an ally is incomparable, okay? So that is all of the utility covered for the Death Knight as well, I think. You can get the slow from Grip of the Dead if you do want it for whenever you place your Death and Decay down, but I mean, I don't even have Death and Decay bound on my bars anymore because you don't need it for Frost DK. I probably definitely should do, so don't judge me, okay? So then finally, let's move on to some macros that I use for the Frost Death Knight. So I have a macro for my Breath of Sindragosa. This basically means this exclamation mark in front of it makes it so that if I press this, if I spam this keybind, it won't cancel my Breath of Sindragosa. If you just press it and then press it again, it will cancel it. So having this exclamation mark in front of it means that this keybind only starts my Breath of Sindragosa and can't also cancel it. And the use 14 in front of it just uses my on-use trinket before my breath, because that's likely going to be a 1.5 minute cooldown or a 2 minute cooldown maybe. So I always want to pair that up with my breath windows, which will also be paired up with my Frost, Pillar of Frost windows and Reaper's Mark windows. This macro we've already covered earlier. This just pairs your Pillar of Frost and Reaper's Mark together. I'm never the kind of person that would want to macro abilities together, even if it's like a slight DPS loss. But you literally will never lose any DPS. You always want to use these cooldowns at the same time. Pillar of Frost isn't on the global cooldown, so you can use these. Make sure you type in or copy in the Pillar of Frost first, because then that is going to buff up your Reaper's Mark and also your Wave of Souls, which you proc when you first use your Reaper's Mark, okay? Other macros that I use a at focus macro for all of my single target abilities. So this just means that if I target the mob, I have a macro here, focus there, so /focus, which I'll also leave. I'll leave all of these macros in a paste bin in the description, by the way. But I have this bound to mouse wheel down, so I'll click on the mob, scroll down, that'll put on my focus up here, and then when I'm not even targeting the mob, if I use my control 2, then I can grip that mob without even targeting it. Say if I'm fighting this mob to do some priority damage into it, I can still grip the other mob. Or I can asphyxiate them with the same at focus macro, and the same goes for my kick as well. Then finally, not really relevant anymore because you don't really use Death and Decay for Frost DK, thank God. But this is an at cursor macro, so this just places my Death and Decay wherever my cursor already is, and it doesn't bring up that green swirly that the like floor placing abilities normally do. So my cursor's over here. The Death and Decay is going to be dropped there. So that would be nice, I guess, for if you're talented into Grip of the Dead and you want to slow mobs. But that is everything covered for the Frost Death Knight for Season 3. Specifically, the Deathbringer Frost DK. I might make a Rider of the Apocalypse Frost DK guide for you guys if you do want one. So let me know down in the comments below if you guys want to see that. Leave a like while you're down there and also subscribe to your boy. I'm going to try and complete DPS guides for every single spec this season and do that every single season going forward and try and be your guys' go-to for the DPS guides to help you guys learn the specs. Okay, but that's me done for today, so I'll catch you guys later.